So my presentation today is on common mistakes, prevention methods, and other things that you don't see as things that lead to hacking your Asterisk box. Too many people focus on SIP security, and that's usually not where people are hitting these days. So I don't do any commercialism in my talks. You won't find my company name, anything like that on my slides. If you do want to advertise next year, let me know. I've got a spot right there. And depending on how we are today, I've got either exploit or protect slides. I might mix both in. And welcome everybody. Is anybody here running plain Asterisk? Woo! It's vanilla. You compiled it yourself. You rolled it. There we go. Any free PBX people? Okay, if you have a laptop, I suggest that you open it up and SSH into your server right now. No, seriously. Okay, so best practices. These were done by John Todd, ages ago. And they're pretty straightforward, but if you've never read them before, these are really helpful tips. In your Asterisk SIP entries, you can have Permiten Deny. These alone are fantastic, because if somebody ever gets a username or password of your SIP device, if you have Permiten Deny in there with IPs, they can try all day, they won't be able to use it, which is awesome. The second thing to do with a default install, if you did vanilla, is always make sure you set auth reject on. If you don't, people will be able to prod out your extensions fairly easy. And that's not a good thing, because little tools like SIPVicious, which every script kiddie uses, will be able to start enumeration attacks on you. Tip number 3, which is straightforward, use strong passwords, don't use numeric things, don't use short things. These can easily be dictionary hacked or slam attacked really fast, especially if you're not having anything that limits your calls or blocks people from doing multiple rejected authentications. Is everybody running fail to ban or some form of protection? Okay, good. Anybody not running fail to ban? Nobody? Wow. Room full of fail to ban. Block your AMI port. You can use permit and deny in there as well. I suggest blocking it entirely. It's much better to block it entirely, because a lot of things don't take into account the messages that you get from that. I don't know if stock fail to ban's covering that, because it's mainly covering SIP messaging, but fail to ban also doesn't cover a whole bunch of other stuff stock if it was installed with free PBX. It won't be like covering mail log errors or SSH errors. Tip number 5, limit your calls. If you have a customer or your own phone hacked, it'd be nice to know that they can only make 1 call a minute, not 10 or 20. A lot of these aren't set. If you open up your main config file, I think FreePBX a long time ago was something like 50 calls per device as a global, which is pretty high. People are free to SSH into their own boxes. I did put a middle Wi-Fi in so I can scrape all your passwords. Make your SIP usernames different from your passwords. A lot of people have done silly things, like they make the SIP username the phone number of the customer. They use the last 4 digits to generate a password. There's a lot of simple things that an admin do to make their own life easy, but these are really incorrect methodologies. Everybody likes human-readable things, but in the end, it's making data more easy for somebody else to create attacks on. Tip 7, default context. You'll find in your regular Asterisk installation and many installations, the default context is where everything goes. Unauthenticated SIP, unauthenticated IX connections, they all go to your default context. And in many cases, depending on who you got your PBX from or who built it or how you installed it, it's got stuff in there. And you don't want stuff in there, especially if people can get access to it easily, because out they go making free calls. Or maybe you've got some testable application in default that you don't know is vulnerable, which I'll show you a little bit later about. So, the dangers of the dialing rules. Here we have a typical IVR. For people that don't know much about dial plan, this is how Asterisk looks inside. You give it a bunch of priorities and rules, and that's what it does. Is anybody here familiar with dial plan? Everybody? Good. Does anybody here see what's wrong with this dial plan? Yes? Nobody? No, well, it's no hang up. Well, no hang up is valid. So here, the major problem with this, if none of you saw this off the bat, if only one person saw it, invalid and timeout, they don't go to a loop, they don't go to a hang up, they go back to the beginning, and there's nothing counting how many times they have stepped through. So why this is really dangerous is if I'm a competitor, somebody that doesn't like your company, and you've got a toll-free number, or you've got a limited number of phone lines, I will go to as many payphones or little cheap dialing companies as I can, and I will ram you for thousands of dollars a day in toll-free charges because your menu loops, and I will tie up all your phone lines, which is very easy to do. And especially since most toll-free with small providers is free to dial, I can just get an account for a few dollars with abc.co and dial toll-frees all day. I can jam up any company that's got a toll-free and a bad IVR. Not to mention cost them lots of money. Now that's not all. Back in the 90s, we had things like war dialers that used modems to, break voice message boxes. This same logic can be applied to IVRs that actually have hang-ups, but require, you do something different to make it loop back around. So keep in mind, no matter where a call is coming from, you set a global variable, not just a channel level variable, and a global variable is the one with the 2 underscores, to let you know how many times that person has gone through your system during that same call. It's very important. So, conference rooms. Conference rooms are another area of abuse. They're very easy to hack because the passwords are numeric, and you can hack them very easily with a dialer. And fail to ban doesn't pick up on that. So one thing you want to do in your dial plan, I don't know if you can do this in FreeBBX, but you want to set an absolute time limit on your conference room. 3,600 is an hour. You might want to double that to 2 hours, but there's no reason you should see somebody in a conference room for 4 or 8 hours. I've gone through many carrier bills, and I've found on their toll-free portion that somebody's been sat in a conference room for over a day. That doesn't make sense, right? Okay. There's a simple notification script here. For those of you that don't know Bash, you can get the slides after this. If you put it in your dial plan like the page before, if somebody times out, the system will call a little notify script so the administrator or whoever's using it can say, oh, we've had somebody stuck on the phone forever. So you know what's going on in your system in the real world, right? Like if you get an email at 3 a.m. So DISA, Direct Inward Dial, fantastic tool. You got your sales guys are on the road, the dialing in, the dialing out, using your company's great long distance. Here is a bad example, a really bad example. Again, easily hackable because it's numeric-based authentication. And they're out. They're making money on you. So the second, more secure way is to actually use this syntax, which is verifying caller ID. Since you know all the people that work for you, why not put their numbers in there and make rules for them? That way people are going to have to both spoof a phone number and an authentication digit, which is a lot harder. Filter. Filter is the single most useful function in Asterisk. If you're not using filter all over the place, you could be in trouble. What filter does is it lets you filter out unwanted digits or names, and in the SIP world, anything can be passed. You can pass semicolons, you can pass quotations, you can pass all sorts of fun stuff. So if you've got no filter on your dial and people are dialing through you, they can do really fun things like this, which would let them append additional dial actions and commands and dial those, juicy toll numbers where they get paid. So yeah, watch out for that, especially if you're a provider. It's not so common, but when it happens, you get hit hard. So, to fix yourself, I've provided an example. It's pretty easy. All you have to do is filter it out using the filter command. You say 0 to 9 as a range. You can also use letters like A to Z, because those are safe too, right? So you may have somebody called Bob instead of 1, 2, 3 as your extension. But yeah, that is a very useful tool. Everybody use filter or nobody using filter? Filter! Okay. All those other people not using filter, you really should be SSHing into your boxes right now. Okay, knowing the version of your Asterisk is super critical. Knowing the version lets you either A, hack somebody's version, or B, protect your own. In this instance, because we were talking about extensions and using filter and caller ID and whatnot, if you send an excessively large caller ID to these versions or lower of Asterisk, it will crash the system. So if there's people out there running older versions of Asterisks, as you see on here, these are not too old, the 1.8s. You can easily break them if you know what you're doing. So beware of system command applications that use variables. This is a big one. Everybody's been saying, oh, ShellShocked, right? Well, big news. This has been out for years. People have known about this one in the hacking community, and they've been having a very good time with it. It's also very, very dangerous in Asterisk. And routers, too. So, if you want to see if your system is hackable with ShellShock, I've got a nice little command here that you can type out, and you will get back your system can get pwned if you're vulnerable. Otherwise, it'll just echo back the last line there, testing bash. So there's more information here too, because FreePBX currently has this issue and it's not patched. You have to manually patch it. So here is an example of me setting up a soft phone to use a caller ID-based hack. So all I did here is I put a semicolon for my caller ID name. I catted out the password file and I piped it to my email address. And if you look inside the system, I made a little test script so you could see this. All you have to do is do this, and you see when you call a shell script and you've got caller ID name in there, which, by the way, if anybody uses the old eFax script, they'll probably notice it passes variables along very similar, right? It looks like that. If you want to test it on your own system too, I've done like a simple little bash script like this. It will, you'll find that it emails you, or emails me if you kept my address in there, the password file on your system. Okay, so we've learned lots about filter and filter, why it's good to use. Everybody should really set their inbound context for their providers to something that filters before it passes it on. So what I recommend most people do is they set an inbound cleaner context, and then they say filter caller ID name, filter caller ID number, like filter everything, filter the extension, filter the name and number, and then pass it on to your actual handling area, because then it's clean, it's sane, you don't have to worry about any badness. No, you don't want to do num, you just want to do, you can do name, num, you can do a whole bunch of them. Yeah, name can have alphanumerics, yeah, you're correct, I should have made that A to Z. You can have 0 to 9 and A to Z and a space and a dash. You really want to omit escape characters like semicolons, and percents, ticks, and away you go. But yeah, filter extension and name where you can. Wherever you're using a variable, filter it. So it's a pretty basic thing I'm trying to drill into everybody. Okay, beware voicemail. Some people love to dial out a voicemail. I know I used to love doing this on the StarTalk voicemail systems on the Meridians. Dial out and call back. There is no sane reason you should ever have these in your voicemail.conf. Like, no sane reason. Default passwords for phones. You should change these. They're very easy to remember. Polycom's a 456. Astra's a 22222. Digium's a 789 to make fun of Polycom. And Grandstream and Linksys, I don't know if they like working together, but they both like the password admin. So yeah, never do that. And the reason for this is I've got a lot of small companies, and you know, for one reason or another, they like to forward their DMZ to their PC so they can play games or remotely access files. But in one scenario, I had a customer, he lost power, and when everything rebooted, the DMZ was now the IP address of his phone, because the phone changed IPs on him. Yay, home little routers. So let's be aware of those. So, there's another wonderful site which I absolutely hate. It's called Showdown HQ. These type of people, I guess they think they're doing better for the world, but they're really profiting on doing large scans that would otherwise be deemed illegal. So, it's more profitable to mine IPs than it is Bitcoins. Here is what Showdown looks like if I type Astra. I get a bunch of Astras, I get their versions, I get their IPs. This is super wonderful because I know what versions are exploitable, I know what the passwords are, and a lot of these people, they've not changed the default password. So all I got to do is this nice little curl script with a grep, and I get this. I get their full password information, which I can now make money with. I can go purchase a number from Purple Numbers that pays out same day. I can go spam a bunch of calls using those credentials, and I can get paid in my dodgy overseas account, so somebody thinks it's somebody in China. Okay, so depending on your phone firmware and the model, this is also good to note, you can hack into them easily, like SNOMs. You can use Showdown HQ to find a bunch of SNOMs with old firmware, and you don't even need to know the password. They could have changed the password to something super complex, and you can still get into it just by faking a header, which is really funny, right? Yeah, I'm safe. I made this wicked awesome password. It's like 30 digits long. It takes me 2 days to type. That curl command takes like 2 seconds to type. So, now we're going to learn a little bit more about hacking. This is a good thing to do internally on a regular basis, or help your friends out. Scan for SIP ports. If your SIP ports are not in 5060, somebody can still easily find it by doing a range like that using Nmap. And with FreePBX, I don't know what's wrong with them or why they keep doing this. They tell you the version of FreePBX, and then they tell you the version of Asterisk. Like, why? It's like, why don't you just give me the keys to the house? So what you should do, if your system is still reporting this back, is you should go into your SIP.conf and change the user agent variable. If you're running FreePBX and you have a PC here now, I would super seriously suggest you do that. So next thing. Knowing the version of Asterisk and the exploits that crash it. So anybody here playing with video calls? Nobody yet? Okay. So if you have the SRTP module enabled and you have a customer trying to enable a secure video call, you can insta-crash the Asterisk if you have these versions or lower. So note, do not enable SRTP unless you plan on crashing. So the other problem with a lot of systems today is they come running too many things. Nmap again can help you find these things to break into, but if you do Nmap on a normal PBX, you should only find 5060 running and really nothing else from the public or some odd port. With a lot of PBX vendors, they like to include FTP, TFTP, Samba, CIFS, all sorts of things, like it's the kitchen sink. They've got Apache on there, everything. So you're not looking to protect one thing, you're looking to protect everything. And the real experienced hackers, they are not going for the Asterisk anymore. They are going for the Apache. They're going for the mail server. They're going for anything else that is easy, low-hanging fruit to them. Because everybody knows fail to ban comes installed default, and it's watching this, and it's watching this, but it's not watching this, 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 and this. So you can easily get rolled and never even know about it. So the common thing for hacking SIP is the SIP Vicious toolkit. It's SV War and SV Crack. If nobody's ever seen it, you can download a copy of Backtrack or Kali. I recommend Kali because it's the newer version. You can give it a try on your own system. The reason auth reject is really required is because if you run this and you don't have auth reject on, you can find out what are valid extensions on a PBX. And if you find a valid extension, you can then escalate to a password file and try and crack it. Which again is kind of pointless since a lot of fail to ban comes stock on a lot of systems. That's why we don't focus too much on it. The mechanisms of resolving that is fail to ban, as everybody knows, rate limiting, proper IDS, IPS. If you actually have a big network, fail to ban can really mess up your box. Like you can jam it, you'll have millions of IPs in there at one point, and it'll just run all wrong. So you really want to get into the mode of putting a proper IDS, IPS system on your edge. And then that way, even the slightest thing, like somebody trying to malform a mail, trying to do a port scan, they get insta-blocked. They don't even get the choice to come in closer to your network, which is a lot better. pfSense is an open source system, and so is Snort, or easily installable packages on any generic piece of hardware. So you can build a super awesome firewall for as little as $100. And the last method, which is really good, if you know that all your customers are on Bell or Rogers or AT&T, just block everybody else. Only allow those networks, and it would significantly decrease the attacks you're going to get. You'll still get attacks, but at least you know they're on this network. I can call my carrier. I can tell them, look, somebody's been naughty. And you won't have millions. So, TFTP, it's not safe. If I see port 5038 running on a network, I know there's an Asterisk box. And I know it's probably got a kitchen sink install like FreePBX. So it's got TFTP running. So all I got to do is fire up this little script. It's going to bang on all the IPs. It's going to return the MAC addresses and the IPs. And then I'm going to scrape the TFTP server to get all those. So I can be in a conference talking to people. Hey, how's it going? I could be running this in the background. I could be pulling everybody's SIP passwords like a boss. So if you want that script, it's in there. Everybody understand Bash? If you don't, it's totally cool. I can explain that a little bit later. So proxies, a lot of big companies, they love that OpenServe, the Camillo, the OpenSIPs. They've got it in front of their Asterisk. It's pumping lots of calls. But you know what? If you're running the exec module, which comes stock, and it's default on, you are going to get owned. There is... oh, I skipped a slide. Anyway, OpenSIPs is vulnerable to ShellShocked and some other forms of ShellShocked. FTP is also not safe. You can scoop the addresses using a transparent proxy like Squid, and most providers, they buy their hardware in bulk, so the MAC addresses don't really differ. They'll go up 1 octet or 2 octets. So you can get that information and you can usually hammer it out, which is pretty easy. There's a question over there? Oh yeah, no, they're not all, it's like a stock install. Exactly, like if using shell variables, it might be. You should check it. Yeah. So I just spoke about the SIP proxy. If you want to see a tool that does it, that searches for SIP proxies and it tries to break them, there's a link right here. Yeah. Okay, so I skipped ahead a slide, that's why. So anyway, if somebody's running this tool, you'll get this on your phone. Does anybody have Polycom phones? A lot of people. Do you get random calls on them sometimes? No, you? This is how you fix the random call issue. You make sure it only takes calls from your servers. I thought I'd put that in there because it annoys people to all heck. Port 5038 is very easily hackable. If you've not limited it down, you can send AMI commands to connect to it fairly easy. FreePBX has admin and AMP 111 as its default. To list out the SIP peers, you can literally say SIP show peers and get everybody's username and password. It's not, like I said, overly complex. Mail. Most people don't consider mail a attack vector. I've seen interesting things like this come up, which people try and use pipes and breaks to have the mail system connect sockets back to them so they can do things. Things you should really never be running on a production environment: PHP myadmin, webadmin. If you have an admin that's using webmin, he does not know his job. Webmin needs to go. Sorry. It's like hackable daily. Asterisk can be poodled. Has everybody heard of Poodle? Yeah, okay. So this one was announced like 2 days ago. Asterisk can be poodled. Anything with SSL can be poodled, really. So you might want to check firewalls, various other things that have the Poodle exploit. If you want to know more about it, I've got a nice little link here. But this is a brand new, fresh one. And carrier billing. Most people don't think of carrier billing as a real hack, but you should really check this out. A tier 1 carrier, one of my customers I did an audit for, and they were close to 60 grand in overages because of wrong rates, wrong billing increments, falsely connected calls. You can actually check this out with a lot of small SIP providers. If you get a test trunk with them and you make a call, you'll see in some scenarios they're billing you from the ringing time versus the answered time. And they're rounding in weird increments. So I highly recommend people look at that, because Asterisk has CDRs in it, and they're not fantastic CDRs, but they do give you a start and a stop, and they should be compared. There is a fax vulnerability from last month in these versions of Asterisks. If you're running the basic version of the fax module, not the paid one, it can lead to a crash. And that's it. That's all for my presentation. Any questions? Awesome. Slides I can give you, I can make available on Google Docs, or I can email them. If anybody else wants to ask me questions after, I'm here. I'll probably sit in the corner drinking water. And yeah, I'm glad to help anybody out. But yeah, if you're running, the one thing I want to get across to people is make sure you're using filter. If you're running versions of Asterisk that report back what version it's running, change your user agent right away. And watch out for the things that are running on your box, because really people aren't looking at hacking SIP anymore. They're looking at hacking everything else. All right, thank you for your time, guys.